Well, hello everybody. My name is 12 Gage. I know it's kind of late, but I just got off a panel and actually I just signed on live so I could listen to that sick ass beat dropping. You know, I can't get enough of that intro music. It really gets you going. I wanted to just get up here and talk a little bit um about true crime. First and foremost, I want to tell people that if I came off a little sarcastic or anything earlier with my cartel live, wasn't feeling the greatest, and usually I'm not that sarcastic or one sided, but it's the logic behind the analytical thinking that I possess, I guess. And I'm not saying that other people don't have that, but silliness at a particular point just it I don't know how to explain it. It just when you're dealing with cases, you deal with facts, you deal with evidence. You don't deal with clues, you don't deal with guessing, you don't deal with made up conspiracies, or at least that's what they teach. Whether they do it when they're investigating a crime is something else totally in itself. So I wanted to get on here to really talk about that because um, oftentimes it's misunderstood how certain things are done, and it's sad that we have such a disdain for law enforcement. We have a disdain for the government, for areas that have been functioning because they have such a terrible record with their ability to prosecute correctly, to investigate correctly, to hide things from the public, and not be as transparent. And I'm not saying everyone, because we've heard of some cases that have been pretty transparent. I mean, the Madeline Soto case was transparent. Um, the case down in San Antonio where the pregnant lady and her boyfriend were killed, um, that was pretty transparent. The cases that are the higher profile cases like Delphi, Karen Reed, Idaho. I mean, it just seems like you listen to these cases and you just never really know what's going to happen next because something's stated and then it's redacted or it's compromised and it's turned so many directions that you lose focus on the original statements. Because I can promise you this, those of you that have been following the IDAHO4 case since it began from day one, I guarantee that you've heard things in the beginning that you're not hearing now. I guarantee that things have changed so many times that you've lost track of exactly what was stated early on in the investigation process and the evidence gathering and things of that nature. You know, it's tragic sometimes because any of us could lose our freedom at any time. At any time. And the way these cases go, it makes you kind of paranoid. I know it does me that if it's so easy for certain things to be put together where your freedom is compromised, that would be terrible to lose your freedom because people are so one dimensional in getting a conviction. And just like on the panel that was on, We're talking about how police might be good people, but based on the orders that they received, they're placed in horrible situations and they're almost set up for failure. And that is tragic when it comes to investigating people's freedom. And I believe that sometimes people forget that that's what law enforcement is about investigating whether someone should be free or whether they've committed a crime to be taken off the street long enough to get the evidence and everything placed together for a judge to sign off on the probable cause affidavit and then go into the preliminary and then the indictment. In some cases, it doesn't happen this way. Some cases it goes into the grand jury and they indict. They investigate because that is their job. They gather the evidence. The prosecution's the only one there. The defense isn't there. It's just the prosecution, so it's one sided. They're presenting the information the evidence that they have against this person and trying to get another statement of indictment. So the person is arrested, there's probable cause, a judge signs off, they're indicted, then they go to trial, they're convicted, and then they can appeal their conviction. So in theory, it's set up. You notice I said in theory. When it worked correctly, it gives you the opportunity to have checks and balances to maintain your freedom against corrupt investigations, lack of evidence being withheld that could exonerate you, or exculpatory evidence that could be withheld to exonerate you. I mean, there's checks and balances there, but if it's not done correctly or it doesn't appear like the officials that are governing the process are doing it correctly, then it causes a lot of problems. And unfortunately, that's what happens in some of these cases that we are witnessing taking place. It's tragic. That's my word right there, tragic. Because any of us, even the ones that are listening in the chat or hear this on replay, anybody could lose their freedom very quickly. It used to be you had to have a long criminal history before you lost your freedom. Now, when you get pulled over or you get arrested for a crime, they try to pile as much charges on you just in case something doesn't stick. And sometimes it's not even pertinent to the crime. But they're gonna pile this stuff on to see what sticks. And that is that is what happens. I wanna play this video of Brady-GIglio. This individual gives he gives an interview on Brady-GIglio. And I want to play it because I've talked about Brady-GIglio before. And it's in so many cases, just in case you don't understand what it means. Okay, so let's listen to this gentleman describe Brady-GIglio.
Can you tell me a little bit about what you know about this case and why it was dismissed?
Well, I mean, I know what is publicly available. I don't have any particular insights as to what happened in the courtroom. I know it was a case that a fairly new murder case. It was a 2020 case, and that during the course of the development of the evidence in the case, they discovered that there was a cell phone that they had in their possession. And when I say they, the police department at the very least, we know that the police department had this phone and had apparently done a data dump on it, was able to obtain information from the phone as a result of a cooperating witness who gave them the passcode and everything. This was a phone that belonged to the alleged victim in the case. And so a defense attorney is going to want to know what's on the alleged victim's phone, particularly to the extent that the alleged victim may have been involved in nefarious activity on his own. So one of the things that we demand and we're entitled to receive from a law enforcement agency and from the DA's office by extension is anything that is considered exculpatory or mitigating. So that comes about as a result of a Supreme Court case from 1963, Brady versus Maryland, which had the holding in it that it's a due process violation for a defendant to not be provided with all evidence, not just the evidence that the prosecution thinks is important. So they are not allowed to make the decision what evidence is provided to a defense attorney. We, as defense attorneys, are entitled to all the evidence, good, bad, or otherwise. And we don't even have to ask for it. They're supposed to provide that to us as a part of their ongoing obligation to provide all the evidence to the defense. And a lot of departments and a lot of prosecutors' offices have made great strides toward making sure that if evidence is not provided, we know why and who's to blame for that.
So this guy's a defense attorney. So he's explaining to you that usually it's just common practice that there is common ground between the defense and the prosecution, that evidence is turned over, evidence of discovery, and it shouldn't be asked for. It should just be turned over as common courtesy of everything being transparent. When this doesn't happen, that makes you wonder what's keeping the evidence from being transferred over so quickly. Because both sides walked the crime scene. They talked to the people involved. Once the indictment has been made and they're preparing for their case, they're walking through the crime scene so that they can make, for the lack of a better word, a storyline to either defend or try to convict an individual of a crime. It's as simple as that.
Corpus Christi Police Department, our DA's office, most of the surrounding law enforcement agencies cross-check each other to make sure all the evidence has been provided. They give each other affidavits of compliance that would have some enforcement teeth to them if it turned out that a lead detective on a case signs off on one of these affidavits swearing to the fact that he's provided all the evidence to the DA's office, and it turns out he either negligently or deliberately did not. Now, Brady doesn't make a distinction about that. It doesn't care whether or not it was overt malfeasance or just negligence. It's a due process violation regardless, because the failure to provide the evidence is what invokes Brady. And of course, since Brady, we've had the Michael Morton Act in Texas, which actually involved overt malfeasance, a prosecutor who deliberately withheld evidence of Michael Morton's innocence, DNA evidence. Obviously, he was not the perpetrator of the crime. And, he went.
So if you withhold evidence and it's later found out, that's a violation of the process. I mean, it's like saying, well, I got something that could show you're innocent, but I'm not going to give it to the defense because that'll set you free. Who are you to hold on to that information to set this person free when you're trying to make him guilty? I mean, as a prosecutor, that's not your job. That's not your duty. Your duty is to make sure that the person's amendment rights are not violated. And that's what happened in the Brady-GIglio. There was exculpatory evidence where it was shown that an individual had previous allegations of not recording information properly, or just like the cell phone wasn't turned over. So therefore, the guy was convicted due to evidence being withheld. So when you hear this stuff going on, a lot of people don't understand. When they think exculpatory evidence, they think, well, there's going to be some big magical thing that comes to light that people are going to say, well, this shows that he wasn't the one. And that's in any case, he or she. So think about, the word exculpatory, excluding, excluding evidence that could prove someone's innocence. If there's an informant, if the informant has charges against them while they're being an informant, or they're using the informant role because they have previous charges against them, they can't be used as a witness. If there's evidence the police failed to turn over or even mention, and it's found out, that's exculpatory. Or they became tunnel visioned on one person when there's obvious other people based on evidence that it could be. Kind of like in Idaho, the three other DNA, but yet only one person's in jail for it. So is that exculpatory? Is that Brady-GIglio? The fact that one of the officers that was at the autopsy had Brady-GIglio violations against them, but still he was allowed to work on this case. He could work on the case all he wanted, but as a witness, his testimony, if he does have that violation on his record, deemed by internal affairs, he will be dismissed as a witness because they're not allowed to testify due to the Brady-GIglio. Let's continue to hear what this man had to say.
To prison, and he spent a considerable amount of time in prison before that particular case was found out, and that DA is no longer a DA. And we have something similar here. We have a cell phone that clearly was not provided to the defense. And at that point, after the trial has started, after a jury has been seated and sworn, jeopardy has attached. A discovery violation at that point in the proceedings really requires that the case be dismissed because it's too late to fix that problem. And that ruins everything. It ruins everything because now we don't know whether or not what the outcome of the case would have been, whether or not a guilty person goes free or an innocent person would have been convicted is no longer the issue because the case is over with. And it's no longer an issue whether winning or losing. It's that justice hasn't been done. And justice didn't get done because somebody didn't do their job correctly. And we know that for a fact. Somebody dropped the ball. It's a question of sorting out who dropped the ball and what remedy is available for that.
He's saying a lot of good things right now. I mean, these are things that are legitimate facts, Somebody dropped the ball on that. So after the jury has been sworn in and you find this piece of evidence to have been withheld, you move for a dismissal because that piece of evidence could have been enough to exonerate the guilt of the convict or the suspected person.
But the alleged victim's family is left without resolution. We are left without knowing whether or not a guilty person has gone free, or possibly an innocent person would have been facing a conviction that he didn't deserve. Anytime that happens, the entire system is thrown into turmoil. When justice isn't done, we all suffer as a result.
Yeah, obviously it's not ever about winning or losing, but like that must be devastating to a family too, because they never get justice.
Closure, anything. And sometimes, there are some families who, Mr. Naranjo's family in particular, he has dodged literally a bullet on this. He has avoided an outcome, a reckoning with the jury. He had a great attorney. The state was represented by a great attorney. Mr. Flores is an upstanding guy. Not a question in my mind that he would not have done anything like this deliberately. So the question is, who dropped the ball and where? And that's one of those questions that may never be answered, because we have too much to continue to do. Unfortunately, the time can't be spent, or probably won't be spent, trying to analyze and figure out and avoid this problem in the future, because time marches on. We have other cases that have to be tried, and we have to all do our job about making sure that defense attorneys have asked for and received all the relevant evidence in a case, that the courts have made sure all the evidence is exchanged hands before trial begins, before a jury is selected and seated and sworn. But unfortunately, that's water under the bridge as far as this case is concerned.
I mean, is that something that's become common here? Or?
It's more common than it should be. It's way more common than it should be. And I know that the DA's office has put some safety checks into place to prevent this from happening. And I guess in any system where you're dealing with human beings, there's always going to be a lack of perfection, and there's going to be that human element. But it seems to be far more commonplace here than it is in other jurisdictions of this size. And one has to ask, what could be done that would prevent this? Because I know the defense bar is organized enough to, we bend over backwards. We're going after everything. We're asking for things multiple times. I routinely sit down with the DA's file and go through and compare their file with my file to make sure that there isn't something that has been overlooked, inadvertently not provided. Obviously, in a worst case scenario, maybe hidden, forgotten, lost, those things.
Did you hear what he said? He sits down with the DA, with their file and his file, and they go over it together to make sure that nothing is missing, nothing has been forgotten, nothing has been misplaced, nothing of all this nature. So if he does it with his DA, the question to be asked in some of these other cases is, how come it's not being done there? Especially with Idaho. How come, surely they sit down and they go over the case material. If not the two lawyers, their paralegals do it. So are the paralegals having issues with power and control? Like one paralegal, power thrusting against the other one and denying discovery in the past? I mean, it's enough to make you wonder, how come this case is so twisted? And even the Karen Reed case, I mean, there's a lot of things in that case as well. An officer asking for nudes from the suspected. I mean, police misconduct in so many ways. But yet, the individual was allowed to testify and everything else as if that didn't even matter. I'm glad that went to a mistrial. Hopefully it ends in case dismissal.
Things happen.
And for people that don't know what is a Brady? It's a Brady violation, Brady law. What is the term and what does it mean?
Okay, so Brady has to do with the Supreme Court case Brady versus Maryland, in which a capital murder trial was conducted. There were two co-defendants, and one of the co-defendants actually had confessed. And that confession was not provided to Mr. Brady during the course of the trial, and so that was not presented to the jury. And obviously, a confessing co-defendant would be very, very germane evidence for you if you were going to trial to be able to show to the jury, hey, guess what? My co-defendant confessed. Now, it may not have been relevant to whether or not he actually participated, but it would certainly be mitigating at the very least. And the Supreme Court held that, denying that evidence, and it was apparently denied deliberately. It was not deliberately not provided to Mr. Brady. And so the holding in that case was denying of that is a due process violation for which the defendant is normally entitled to a rehearing or perhaps even a new trial.
Exactly. So they're talking about a co-defendant in the IDAHO4 case, which, I've never really spoke on that individual. But even so, that individual deceased. So if he was a co-defendant, if he was knowledgeable of anything that went on, or he participated in the planning of, or any of that stuff, and the suspect that's in jail right now was part of that conspiracy to commit this crime, even though if he wasn't the person that did it, he's guilty by association. So if they find the co-defendant, who is this other person who is now deceased, was the conspirator, and this other individual who's the suspect that's in jail was also in the mix, then he still is guilty as the person who's deceased. It doesn't change anything.
And then, of course, Texas adopted the Brady rule in the Michael Morton Act, which is codified in the Code of Criminal Procedure now, which requires as a statute that all evidence be provided to the defendant. And we don't, like I said, we don't even have to ask for it. They have an ongoing obligation to provide that. And every bit of it, the prosecutor, again, does not get to decide whether or not the evidence is relevant. All evidence has to be handed over to the defense. We decide whether it's important or not to present at the time of trial.
Is there anything else you feel like I'm not asking or is important for people to know about, even if it's not this case, just the fact that it's been happening pretty often here in other cases?
And a lot of times that is a function of leadership. An office has to be dedicated first and foremost to integrity. You have to want the fact of your cases to be, that the cases are being properly tried, that there isn't a lingering doubt about whether or not justice is being done in the courts. And you can't have that in an environment which is not, does not have integrity as its first and foremost goal. And so the more often that these things happen, the more often that fingers are pointed at individual members of the DA's office or at the DA himself, that again reduces everybody's confidence in the system. And we're going through a crisis of confidence throughout the country right now regarding the judicial system and the jury system and whether or not we can rely on verdicts delivered by imperfect humans and cases tried by imperfect humans. How do we get to the point where we have confidence in the outcome of a police investigation, a district attorney's office handling the indictment of the case, the appointment of competent attorneys to represent the individuals, and then the outcome by a jury which is fairly and impartially selected to hear the evidence and to carry their duties out to a verdict that we can all rely on and not have to second guess. It's not easy. And a break in any of those links is a downfall for the whole system, unfortunately.
And because of double jeopardy, he can't be tried criminally for the same crime again. Could he be tried, could there be a civil case with this, or how would,
Well, sure. There aren't the same set of rules for civil cases as there are for criminal cases. I mean, a civil case can be, except for some very narrow issues regarding what's called res judicata, a civil case can be tried any number of times. A criminal case, once jeopardy has attached, the double jeopardy clause of the Constitution prevents him from being retried, which is great for him. It's not so great for the family of the alleged victim because we don't know what the outcome would have been had the case been tried appropriately or developed appropriately and provided to the defense counsel in a timely manner. But finding that out, It's happened to me before. And during the course of a trial, suddenly a witness is talking about evidence that you've not seen, that the prosecution has not seen. The whole thing comes skidding to a halt, and the court is left with the option of trying to figure out what can happen. You've got the jury in the box. They've been sworn. Jeopardy has attached. So how do you proceed in a trial like that without doing harm to both the defendant's rights and the whole process, the whole system? You can't. A judge is left with a very, very unsavory job of having to either declare a mistrial or, as happened in this case, relying on the prosecution to do the right thing and to dismiss the case, acknowledging the shortcomings and the failures.
Anything else?
Right. That was awesome. Because he explained it very well right there. Hey, everybody in chat. Thank you for being here so late with me. I don't know what time it is where you're tuning in. But, I wanted to talk about the Brady-GIglio in a lot of these cases because it happens. It happens. And, a lot of things that I hear is people instinctively say that individuals are condemning an innocent man to death or the firing squad or this and that and the other. How can you have that on your conscience? But at the same time, I say, well, how can you have the innocence of a guilty man on your conscience if that's the side that you sway? You're saying that the criminal, if he committed these crimes, is more favorable than the victims who lost their lives in the situation. So if you're going to divide sides like that, that's basically what you're saying. And it looks like you're talking about the stalking or not stalking. I don't know. I haven't been reading the chat that good. It looks like you're talking about cameras or something of that sort. There being cameras at 1122. I've never heard of that, but I don't believe there was any cameras at 1122. I haven't heard of that. If there would have been any kind of digital footprints there, it might have been from the rideshare driver if he had his phone hooked up to like a camera, documenting his path, or the DoorDash driver with the GPS or a possible camera. But I don't think that 1122 would have had a camera. Yeah, the 1118 home. I thought it was 1112 that had the camera. That was the camera, 1112. But I'm not gonna get involved in the chat with that. That's on y'all. Anyways, with the Brady-GIglio, it is like this lawyer just spoke on. It can be leading to a mistrial or possibly the prosecution dismissing the case. If the defendant is found guilty without the Brady-GIglio being exposed during the trial, usually after the trial, that's when all the Brady information comes to light, and this is where they can overturn the conviction or dismiss the charges. So everything's set up in the checks and balances, so your freedom when is preserved in the perfect scenario of the justice system. So try to remember that when you're thinking about these cases where it's a slam dunk case, or you're hearing that they got more evidence and the person's not going to be able to squirm their way out of accountability. Excuse me. Or any of this stuff. So I think it's interesting to hear about the Brady-GIglio, and if you want to do some research on the case, it's Brady versus Maryland. and I can't think at this hour what the Giglio one is. But both those cases are very interesting, and I'm glad that there was laws enacted to protect us from the situation that happened in those cases. Because without that, we could have lawyers holding or DAs holding information that could set us free or even dismiss the charges or cause a mistrial or whatever. So Columbia hat, I don't know what that means. But thanks, Twizzle. I hope you like it. Oh, the Columbia hat, yeah. The other side has like the fish shaped into the image of a American flag. That's my fisherman's hat right there. So thanks for noticing. Yeah. I'm getting tired. I've been on 2 panels now. Plus the long live that I did earlier, and I'm still not feeling 100%. I just thought I'd get on here to keep moving because I'm not one of those people that can lay around and be sick, but for some reason, being at work and being sick just takes so much more out of you. I don't understand it. But my head has been pounding all day, so I've been sleeping most of the day. Um, the hurricane is really bad down at the south portion. We really haven't gotten a lot of rain up here where I'm at. We've gotten, a little bit, but not a lot. It's supposed to rain, I think, tomorrow again, but where I'm at, kind of like a valley. So if the rain does come, sometimes it comes around us. It doesn't necessarily stay over us. So it'd be nice if we got the rain that they're getting down south. I heard Houston flooded. I've seen videos of that. Um, and yeah. Anyways, guys, I'm glad that you came in here for a little bit, and I hope you watched this video on this attorney breaking down the Brady-GIglio because it's in so many cases. It's in so many cases, and it'll be in cases coming up. And it's always great to be knowledgeable on the facts rather than the fiction. And try to remember something, okay? Even though we're fascinated on true crime of people's crimes, let's try to focus on the living rather than the dead because, you know, sometimes we neglect the living because we're so focused on people that are no longer here. And I understand that we have an attachment to that. I get that. I'm not trying to tell you how to live. I'm just saying that, it would be nice to kind of make a life while you got it, you know? That's all I got to say about that. Anyways, it's time for the maestro to cue that music. Good night, y'all.